The major purpose of this course is to give lots of information, lots of principles about how to raise children, what not to do, what's damaging to children. I assume that we're all in denial here. Denial is about not knowing about these things. Denial doesn't have to do with knowing and denying. Denial has to do with not being aware of what's going on. In the old days, you used to live in maybe a farming community, and there might have been 50 to 100, 150 relatives in that area. And they reinforced the culture. Today, we've come to the cities. You don't have uncles and aunts reinforcing what mom and dad think. Families almost isolated in the middle of this huge population. A few years ago, a young man that was 18, he knew how to hunt, how to fish, how to plow the field, how to milk the cow. Is that true? He knew how to get married and raise a family by 18. And a girl that was 16, 18, did she know how to survive? She knew how to survive. She could churn the butter, she could sew, and she was ready to bear children. Give the guy some ground and a mule, and he could go farm, couldn't he? And if the kid did something wrong in town, everybody in town knew about it. And later on, even in these rural communities, small towns, even when they had cars, you'd go cruising and do something wrong. Before you got home, your folks had been told by somebody that saw you, and you were in trouble already. Here you can get lost here. Does this make sense to you? Now what I'm saying is that traditional values are no longer reinforced by the extended family. The extended family, in many cases, is non-existent. Before, this little boy had uncles and grandpas and a dad to learn how to be a man and what was important and what the values were. We have lost that, and with that, we've lost tons of validation, tons of support for the mom and dad. Instead, mom and dad have something like 200,000 murders on the TV coming in. They got everything in the world, these movies, these rock concerts, everything battling against the old-time values, okay? The traditional family values. So the children and the family are being torn away. It's of epidemic proportions. And these kids are really unprotected by the family shield. There's not that family loyalty anymore. And kids can do things and everybody doesn't know who they are or John's son or whatever. Let me read a couple things to you. In America today, 55% of the teenagers living in single-parent households live at the poverty level. All right? Listen to these. The number of teen suicides has doubled since 1970. The school dropout rate is as high as 60% in many major U.S. cities. The number of 15-year-old girls who are sexually active has doubled since 1990. 60% of all high school seniors say they have drunk alcohol in the last 30 days. Our children have never before been in such great danger, and parents feel overwhelmed. 25% of the kids don't graduate from high school in America. 50% have used drugs by the time they're seniors in high school. 80% plus have been drunk once or more already in high school. And these kids that are addicted smokers right now started smoking when they were 14 years old. More U.S. kids are arrested and locked up than any other country for felonies. 50% of all U.S. crime is done by boys 15 to 21 years of age. That's the most in the world by a lot. More U.S. teen girls get pregnant and have abortions than girls in any other country in the world. What is this saying to you? Every 8 seconds of every school day, a child drops out of school. Every 26 seconds, a child runs away from home. Every 47 seconds, a child is seriously abused or neglected. Every 67 seconds, a teenager has a baby. Every 7 minutes, a child is arrested for drug abuse. Does that impact you? It wasn't like that when I went to school just a few years ago. Something's going on here, something that we've really lost. I had a lot of problems with one of my children. Everything went just fine with me in my life. Everything was just in order. And then my life started to fall apart as I started to have trouble with one kid. I would never be here today if it wasn't for my one son, my last son. He taught me more about life than I learned anywhere else. And it was a miserable time, but I learned. I want to share that with you. The second leading cause of death during adolescence was suicide. Car accidents are what? Number one. Can you imagine our children are killing themselves, committing suicide? And we're talking about some really unhappy people here, aren't we? Very unhappy. How times have changed. I want to tell you that it's not just me standing before you that has trouble raising kids. That this is all over the country. In 1940, they took a survey. These are horrible horrible things in 1940 they were wrestling with. Talking in class. Chewing gum during school hours. Making noise in class and disrupting. Here's one. Involves bodily harm. Running in the halls. Getting out of turn in line and cutting in. We got some real problems here. Wearing improper clothing to school and not putting paper in the wastebasket. Now, I taught school in the 1960s, and I took weapons away from kids. I broke up a fight a day, at least an average of a fight a day. They've gotten more serious. Drug abuse, how's that compare to running in the halls? Alcohol abuse, pregnancy, suicide, rape, right on campus. Robbery, assault, burglary of the schools, arson of the schools, bombings of the schools, murder, absenteeism, vandalism, extortion, gang warfare, abortion, and venereal disease. Is that worse than getting the paper in the basket? There's something really happening here. We did the things we were supposed to as family, we thought. We had our family councils. We had our picnics. Little League, the whole tamale. We did this. And then something happened. My last son came in and told me, Papa, I've been on pot. And I thought, well, let's work it out. And he thought, gee, I thought you were going to kill me. Really beat me up or something. And I said, why would you think that? Not knowing anything about this at that time, being very naive, we sat down and discussed it, and we decided he wasn't going to have any more. All right? Isn't that good? Wouldn't you all decide that? Absolutely. And that was the end of it. I didn't come to for another 3 months, but he was hooked in there, and he was starting to get hooked on other stuff. And I was frightened because I did all the stuff I was supposed to do. And I thought if you did all the stuff you were supposed to do, that everything would be okay. Well, I heard that taught all over. If you did what you were supposed to do, and you were where you were supposed to be, and you taught your kids right, and you set a right example, and you didn't get drunk on the weekends, you didn't drink, and you didn't do these things, that your kids would be okay. How many have heard that? Do you believe it? You used to? And if you were a good parent, your kids would come out okay. And if you weren't a good parent, your kids wouldn't come out okay. There's another factor in here. Because I've talked to parents that feel very, very guilty about what their children do, even after they've taught them and loved them and done the best they could. And that's one of the things we need to do in here is unhook some of that guilt, because you don't need that. But I started going through hell, and you cannot imagine what my life was like. The police were involved, and he was picked up for burglarizing. He was into drugs. I could not believe that this was happening to me. I told the first one, drugs will kill you. And they said, okay, Daddy. I'm going to take them? No. I told my oldest daughter, drugs will kill you, sweetheart. Don't take drugs. Okay, Daddy. And then the next one comes along. I say, son, don't take drugs. See your sisters and brothers, they're okay. And he says, hey, it's my life. I'll do what I want to do. I says, wait a minute, you didn't understand me. This stuff will kill you. And he said, I'm going to do what I want to do. Get out of my face. This is my life, and I want to do what I want to do. And boy, I want to tell you, that was a hard way to go. He would be out on the streets, and I was at work, and I couldn't think about anything. Guess what I was thinking about? I was thinking about him. And I was trying to get things straight. And I said, my bottom line is, buddy, you can't have drugs and live in this house. So he'd leave. And then I'd report him, run away, and go get him and haul him back and say, you can't run away from home. I'm telling you, it was a real nightmare. And the police were there, and there was a warrant out for him, and I found out where he was and reported him and got him picked up and put in jail. And go down there and sit there day after day while they process him, talk with the prosecution, the attorney or the DA, whatever he's called, and talk to those public defenders. And it was a nightmare. My wife and I could not believe what was going on to our lives. Our whole lives were uprooted. Our whole lives turned upside down. And I went for answers, and I went to books, and I saw contradictions in books. One book says do this, another book says do this. And I went to friends, and they couldn't help. I went all over trying to find help. I started to come to when he was in the Phoenix house. When he was in the Phoenix house in a drug program. And he was screaming at me. You're trying to control my life, and you're trying to run my life. I have to do everything you say, and I hate it, and I hate you, and I hate everybody. And life stinks. And those aren't exactly the words he used. But he was raging. And it was bad. Really bad. And I was saying, I beg your pardon? See, I was still into this. I'm trying to control your life. I'm controlling your life. I'm telling you what to do, right? Right. I have to do everything you said. You're telling me what to do. Can you imagine this going on in therapy? And he's saying, yeah, you tell me everything. I got to do everything you say. And I say, wait a minute. You don't do anything I say. I want you to finish your Eagle Scout. Would you do that? No. I would like you to go to school. Do you want to do that? No. You flunked out of 2 schools. Where am I telling you what to do? I don't want you to rob people. You do that. I don't want you to burglarize. You do that. I don't want you to do this. Everything I don't want you to do, you do. In other words, he does everything I don't want him to do and nothing I want him to do. Now, can you please translate that for me, buddy, and tell me how I'm controlling your life? He said, well, you would if you could. And he was right. And I would if I could. Because I was hurting so bad. I hadn't cried in many, many years, since I was 10 or 11. Because I was told, don't cry. You don't cry. Men don't cry. Men aren't afraid. Men don't hurt. So don't cry. And so I didn't cry. When I was losing my son, and he was standing there screaming at me, and all of a sudden it hit me one day. No matter what he does, I love him with all my heart and soul. And he's standing there raging at me, and I love this guy. I'm hooked right at the heart. Now this can happen to any of you. It can happen to any of you. And it will happen to some of you probably. And I think you need some ammunition. You need to know what to do.